last year I talked about, like I said, I talked about connections. And if you remember, I saw that supply chains were falling apart. I think industry bodies, academia, government departments were not connected. I saw energy not connected into manufacturing. I saw lots of disconnections. And I think that me and a lot of other people concerned enough to try and do something about that. And it was about how then you join those things back up again. So the background really to this presentation stems from a belief last year that, you know, somebody's got to stand up and start to do something. So it was, as I said earlier, for those that weren't here when I just sort of, on my 5 minutes at the very end of the AGM, if you if you were in the automotive industry or the aerospace industry, and you went to the Automotive Council meeting with BIS or the Aerospace Council meeting with BIS, you fit in a very small room, which is very, very good for clarity of purpose, clarity and purpose of message and communications. So BIS are very clear on what the asks are and what the needs are of those sectors. And these are the advanced manufacturing sectors. And I still believe, and I think a lot of people agree with me, that the chemical industry underpins just about anything you can think of. Without the chemical industry, there wouldn't be advanced manufacturing sectors. You know, it is the industry of industries. So I think we'd all seen the potential, well, the decline, the potential for more decline, the need for a renaissance, the need for a change. And not just me. But equally, if I could show you now, that if those who are old enough will remember, was it a Unison or a Unite advert? Little ants crawling across the TV screen to move a polar bear. And the point about that was it's far better to speak in unison collectively than as separate entities. Back to connections again. So, in the meantime, we formed this chemistry growth strategy group, and it was, on the one hand, if you include everybody, it would have, again, we would have filled this room twice over. So the compromise was to try and make sure we had a broad representation from big industry, SMEs, UK-owned, foreign-owned, embracing the professional organizations, trade associations, the regions, CIA, SCI, and so on, and also government, BIS particularly. And there's been a working group for 6 months or so now. And I think in the first instance, agreeing on the things that we can agree on. We didn't start to argue about all the things that we didn't agree on. What is it we agree on to focus onto some key areas, some key points that we have to drive home. So that's been up and running, and that's the background to that was really as I described last year. So that's why I was saying it's probably an end-of-term report to see where we got to. So what was the focus? What did we agree on? Energy and climate change, innovation, value change, trade and finance, access to finance particularly, that is. We talk about that a little while longer. Regulation and skills. You know, we've talked skills to death, and we'll just touch on that in a while as well. And also, we recognize that time is of the essence. It wasn't just about, we've talked about these things a lot, in some cases for years and years and years. So how are we really going to make a difference? How are we going to accelerate this? And so that was on our minds as we've been through this. So, the headlines then. Really securing energy and feedstocks, as per my discussion last year, accelerating innovation, reinforcing and rebuilding chemical supply chains. We'll talk some more about that. And also, how are we going to deliver that through a genuine partnership between industry and all of the associations and government. And I'll give you some examples about that starting to work. So, energy. I'm not going to read all the words out. Does anybody know, you didn't realize that you're coming to a quiz this evening. So, because you're not going to go to sleep just yet. So what is the difference, if we can do multiples, between US energy prices and Europe energy prices in gas? Any idea? 3 times, 4 times. Yeah, it's near enough. So what about if you overlay EU ETS on top of that? It's about 5. It's a lot. So if we all break into a sweat and improve our productivity by 100%, no difference. It's a big issue. And of course, for bearing in mind we're talking about all of the industry here, for a large part of it, energy and feedstocks are one and the same thing. So it's a European issue, not just a UK issue. So, and I understand that if you read this stuff, I actually believed that in the US there would be probably repatriation of their cheap gas and gas liquids in the next 10 to 15 years. If you read ACC reports, they tell you to expect a wave coming this way of $14 to $16 billion worth of chemicals. If you look at US balance of payments forecast, you don't see 16 billions going the other way, which is a worry. So, but then I start to read more and I talk to people and they say, well, probably, because the issue then is you get products which start to interfere with the supply chain issues that I'm concerned about. But then I understand now that they're basically finding gas every day is a gross exaggeration. But the reserves are building and building. And the belief now is that the US will never actually build enough infrastructure and downstream capability to match gas extraction. So therefore, gas will stay, the cost of gas will stay low in the States. So any kind of dream that's all going to end sometime soon appears to be, a dream. It's a misnomer. So therefore, this is a structural issue that's going to stay with us. If you go to Asia, whilst Asia don't have shale gas, they've got coal. They've got enormous quantities of coal, which is currently mined and then gasified in the traditional way. But I guess some people in the room, and I know a little bit about UGC, underground gasification of coal, which is like fracking, but it isn't. But it's basically producing coal bed methane or syngas. And they have the capability within 10 to 15 years to be in an energy position comparable with the US. So you kind of see where that leaves Europe if nothing happens. So I think everybody agrees that we have a problem. So the idea then, and I think also everybody in the room will have a view on whether this is safe, whether it's environmentally friendly. There are all kinds of issues, especially if you've got one in your backyard. So I think there's a lot of work to do to understand, truly understand the implications of safe exploitation of unconventional and conventional gas supplies, and how that we kind of, certainly from a UK perspective, how that becomes integrated into our economy. And I'm talking on a 10 to 15 year timescale. This is going to happen in 2 or 3 years. This is a long-term, medium-term activity. Now, that's not unreasonable. So I think maybe I mentioned last year, Americans have been, I asked the question last year, how long have America been drilling for shale gas? Answer? 40 to 50 years. What really happened in 2004, 2005 was enormous step changes in IP and directional drilling, and also lubricants. Technology just enabled a different market altogether. So I've got to believe that if that can happen in 10 to 15 years from a standing start, technology-wise, there is no reason that Europe and the UK can't be in the same place. Then we've got to overcome resistance and the permitting and the planning, and all of those things are going to get in the way, potentially. Notwithstanding, you see in the words there, safe exploitation. So there's some big challenges. But we're all agreed that this is an area that we have to work on. So the fact is the potential is there. The reserves that we understand in the UK, if you consider the UK rather than Europe, mean that we could be self-sufficient in that timescale. So enabling projects, demonstrators, proving, making sure that we have commercial viability. I mean, and you think about it, in the US it is commercially viable, but nevertheless, we've got to do all those things here. And then something I feel very strongly about is if gas of any form has to be part of the mix. You remember last year I said I believed in nuclear, in wind, in tidal, in solar. All of those things are relevant, and so is gas. You know, gas is the flex on everything. It has to be there, certainly for the imaginable future. Then none of us in the room would argue that we're reckless, that we're not environmentally aware, and that we don't care about what we leave for others. So the idea then that we really do support research into economically viable solutions for carbon capture and storage, and I think also conversion, however fanciful that might appear, I think is real and we agree on. And then also overlaid that, there's the obvious research, and we come back to where SCI and other organizations fit into renewables and using industrial biotechnology, very important part of our future. And the numbers, if you look at biotechnology from an energy and fuels and just what it can do in terms of overall economy, it runs even in the UK, enormous numbers, 40, 50, 60 billions worth of GVA over in the fullness of time. So it's an enormous potential to be unlocked by scientists and technologists. So there's a huge challenge there. So from a priority point of view, from a focus point of view, I think we're all agreed that this is a big area for us to focus on. The other point, just to go back here, so what's happened? So what? The government in last year set up a shale gas or unconventional gas office, and that was a marriage brokerage to bring together drilling companies and landowners, interested parties who need to work together to do the kinds of things we're talking about. They've put in place a 1.2 billion sterling infrastructure fund, which is a guarantee fund for building, for pipelines and infrastructure, for sweetening gas and gas separation, and so on and so forth. So it's a start, and I think it's a very encouraging start. And I think the government of the day need to be applauded for recognizing that's going to be part of rebuilding the connectivity that I keep talking about. They've also supporting local demonstrator projects through the RGF fund. So if you go look in the RGF list, I won't go through them, but there is significant sums of money being set aside through RGF3, and potentially, I think, also some coming through in RGF4 when it comes to genuinely take forward the knowledge, the knowledge creation in terms of are they safe, are they viable, and. They're actually going to, we're starting to do that with government money back in the second half of this year. So these are things that we've been talking about and asking for collectively, and we are starting to see some real changes. So, accelerating innovation. I think innovation really is, for me, is the driver for growth. I think the UK is blessed with very smart, innovative, creative, intellectually bright people, and we can go forever about how many good ideas we give away or we don't develop. We touched on that a little bit earlier. So I think we've got to find a way of harnessing that better than we have done previously. So there are a number of ways of doing this. Just talking to Will, where's he sitting? The Technology Strategy Board, and these special interest groups that we're setting up. There's another one being set up, I think, as we speak, which was the Innovation Knowledge Centre. There's certainly a bid to create one in Nottingham University, I think, which are all to do with, and that was specifically focusing on bioscience. Very interesting, and it's bringing together critical mass of new chairs, and I think many PhDs are really changing the critical mass of how we do research and how we innovate and how we incubate that research. So there are real live examples, again, not many, but they're starting, as opposed to having none. And again, this whole piece about, well, where do we think You know, where does all this fit in the jigsaw puzzle that is the chemical industry? You know, where are the real value adds? Where are the bits that if we could fix something, we fix lots of other things? And it's working together on that overview that really is helping to target where the innovation needs to be. If you go back to carbon research, I was saying to some people before, I don't know, is it algae? Is it anaerobic digesters? Is it inorganic chemistry? Is it nanotubes? There are all kinds of areas of research. And I firmly believe that in the future, my view of the future is not rooted in what I know today. I just believe that we will find solutions not just to the natural facts that exist. We'll find a way of industrializing those processes. Knowledge creation is exponential. Who knows what we'll know in 10 or 15 years' time? So we come back to that point. So it's about working together to identify those areas where we think we can win, and then really putting resources into focusing in those areas. The supply chains. I think I mentioned last year that where I sit in my industry, I operate a lot of kit, and we employ very, very few people, really. If you look through the supply chains to sort of convert it to converters, and all the way through to product manufacturers using chemicals, that's where the jobs are. And so right into the advanced manufacturing sectors. So, and there are clearly some gaps. So this is about recognizing where we import materials or products, where we have a raw material, we have a need, and we're importing something. So where are they? What value is that to the UK? And how then do we get that piece of the jigsaw puzzle back in? It's about working together to look at the value proposition there and to see how we start to underpin the so-called advanced supply chain initiative by identifying SMEs that will sit between that and base chemicals. So a lot of work's going on there as well to do that. In fact, a lot of work had gone on before, and I think we certainly have government very interested in how to make this work. I think their view is that if we can identify businesses to bring into the UK or businesses that we can grow into new areas, then through the normal processes of RGF and so on, they're quite prepared to make money available, subject to all the normal conditions. So the enabling areas. I've talked about climate change. Leveraging existing government initiatives, and there are many. And I think part of this is working through the kind of the morass of enterprise zones or AMSCI pots or RGF pots with the Green Bank. I'm talking to some guys from the Green Bank next week, just trying to understand what they think their role is in supporting some of the things that we might be interested in doing. Trade associations, in terms of regulatory culture. I think, for me, I am apolitical. I think governments need to get in the way when they need to, and I think they need to get out of the way when they need to. And so sometimes it's good just to get out of the way and follow the value propositions, notwithstanding the fact that there's the environmental issues that I mentioned before. So it's about making sure that we don't end up with regulation or legislation that slows us down, where difficulties in permitting or planning, particularly with gas exploration. So it's working to get legislation in a positive way. I mean, interestingly, I would vote tomorrow to ban landfill. You say, wow, that's terrible. Well, I think what that would do is a positive thing, doesn't cost anything, and it will drive technology solutions to avoiding landfill. And that will happen very quickly, because most of them exist anyway. It drives the value. So I think we can actually influence regulation in a very, very positive way. And collectively, we have a lot more chance of doing that than if we're one association or one academic body or whatever, or one company. I think also, the financial community, I mentioned the Green Bank, and I think we all recognize the difficulties since the crash, in particularly for SMEs. Everything is suddenly risky. So how do we unlock that? How do we guarantee, if we're trying to incubate companies and encourage innovation, encourage growth, that just means somebody's taking a risk to me. And that's quite a natural thing to do. It's risky. So, but we've got to do it. So how do you put those two things together, given the history of the last 6 or 7 years? There's an understanding of that, and I think that is kind of work in progress, but there's a real willingness to try and unlock that in some way, shape, or form, as opposed to none at all. But that's probably the area that I worry about most at the moment. So that's the vision. This document, by the way, it's going to be launched next week. It will be available, I can't remember, is it after the 10th of July, I think. It's a very weighty thing, so I'm just summarizing it here. What I would say is just consider it to be work in progress. Is it perfect? Probably not. Would you find faults in it? Probably you will. Hopefully, you would find that most of it would touch a chord and you would say, yep, I'm with all of that. So I wouldn't think, when something tries to be all things to all people, you kind of fall over. But I think generally it's heading in the right direction. So I wouldn't expect it to be, it will change over time. It will be organic. That's the vision. We will have, I think, secured, I'm worried about sustaining what we've got and then ultimately growing what we've got so it truly is in a position to underpin UK manufacturing and get UK manufacturing back to where it was, at least, let's have an aspiration of 25, 30%, which is where it was in the 60s and the early 70s. And we can see the numbers we're talking about. They're huge. So the size of the prize, I think everybody gets. And that's notwithstanding some of the issues I was talking about with bioscience and the possibilities there. If you go back to unconventional gas, I'll give you an example of the size of the numbers we're talking about. There is one field of coal, if fully gasified, it's 40 kilometers square, would yield more gas than we've ever recovered from the North Sea ever. So also on that point, we have about 500 or 600 years worth of coal and probably also shale and shale gas. Back to my earlier point, do I actually believe that we'll be using coal and oil in 500 years? I have no idea, but I guess not. I think probably we will never get to the end of those reserves because some very smart people who will come after us will find different ways, smarter ways of creating energy that don't involve using carbon. But for the time being, certainly for the next, I guess, 20 or 30, it's there, so we have to find ways of managing the impact of that. So what that was showing was the value of what we do. And it's in the pack, and I think people will get this, Joanne, I think. So I'm not going to go through, I'm not going to sort of bore you rigid by showing you all. You can read all the numbers. Just believe them that they're, bearing in mind what I said, that aerospace, automotive, those two are construction, like 100 billion. I'm arguing we underpin that. Imagine that not one molecule not one chemical that goes into any of those sectors is made in the UK. What happens to the balance of payments and what happens to the profitability of those advanced manufacturing sectors? So it really is that important that we understand that, articulate that, which then makes the case for doing what we're doing. So we've tried to be inclusive. Certainly SCI have been involved in this and lots of other organizations. It's not perfect. We've been looking at where the showstoppers were. Have we got any major emissions? And there has been a number of iterations of the document that you will see. And I think it's getting better. Every iteration, it got better and better. There is a meeting next week with Michael Fallon on the 10th of July where I think somebody will do a better job than me in sort of summarizing where we're up to. And then I think there will be a formal launch of the document. And I'm not too sure how that particular piece will work out. But then you see the meeting the first meeting of something we've called the Chemistry Growth Partnership. I think chemistry is important, we'd all agree. Growth is important, we'd all agree. And partnership is important. So I think those are three great words that kind of capture the essence of what we're trying to do. So, one voice, one congregation around those key points. And the need and the desire to make it strategic and not tactical. Making sure that, although, there are, everybody understands that if there are very, very few people in the room representing the Chemistry Growth Partnership, that they truly represent the needs and the aspirations of everybody. We've got to still get some corporate commitment, as it says. That's goes without saying. But equally, I think some of our best advocates can be the industries that we support. Aerospace, automotive, getting those, those organizations to recognize and understand what it is we're trying to achieve and the absolute benefit that we deliver to them. They can be part of that partnership in a direct way, not even an indirect way, to help us achieve what we need to do. So it's stretching beyond even that chemistry growth partnership and engagement. So we have been engaging, we have been working with government, been working together. And chemistry was the glue that was kind of tying us all together, from SMEs to, across government departments and multinationals. So progress, I would argue, has been made. Not enough. We all want it to happen tomorrow or today, but sadly things move more slowly than that. Finally, what about SCI? What can it contribute to the delivery? Well, I think there is an enormous amount. It's obvious to me. I don't come here very often, but there's an enormous amount of ability, intellectual ability in the organization, coupled with practical knowledge and many, many years of experience. So drawing on that, and helping to work in these areas that I've talked about, of energy, and I know we talked earlier about setting up an energy group, and solving maybe not so much about, there are technical problems with gas exploration, but equally managing the impact of the delivery of that. There's some real work to do. Accelerated innovation, an obvious area for involvement. And maybe also in reinforcing and rebuilding supply chains. But then, the member communities sort of building on the expertise, particularly in biofuels and bioproducts, biorefining, bioscience, I think is a key area. And all of that goes with that. I think also, the young people in SCI as well, the early career people, community. And we talked about before about collaboration and engagement, reaching out. This is it's catching the wave now. There's an opportunity here to truly integrate, to truly work in a broad collaborative way and really punch above SCI's weight in what will be, I think, a great partnership. So there is a lot that SCI can do and can do to contribute to the further creation and the refinement of this, but more importantly, to the delivery of this in the next 10 to 15 years. Industry has a lot to answer for, really, in terms of its inability. It claims, where are all the apprentices? Well, I think that, this business has always cycled. Parts of our business have always cycled. And I know for a fact the first thing that goes, we all know what goes first when we start at the bad times. Usually it's training and development. Now, so therefore, shame on us. And so to expect government to be organising apprentice schemes and to be putting hundreds of millions of sterling into schemes, when these are our companies and it's it's investing in our futures. So you say, well, big companies, no problem. Small companies, if you're in an SME of 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 people, where I started from here was, connections and collaborations. it can't be, beyond the wit to work in a collaborative way, a group of like-minded SMEs getting a different critical mass to deliver technical training for, even though they don't own them. And we're now back to regulations and all that employment law that kind of gets in the way sometimes. But there are ways and means that we can get small companies to really punch above their weight. And that appears to be exceedingly difficult because what they've been, forgive me for being, blunt, but the easy option is to just go buy somebody for slightly more money than somebody else is paying. That's been the solution so far, as opposed to investing in 2 or 3 or 4 years of training somebody. And the argument they would give you is, if I do that, then the company down the road goes and poaches that person. So it's kind of a catch-22. We've got to break out of that. So I agree with you, but I think industry has a lot to do, to put its own house in order before asking for lots of money from august organizations like our present government. Hands up, anybody who's been to Weight Watchers. There is a point to this. So I go to Weight Watchers. It really answers this question, I think. I think it does. So I go to Weight Watchers, and I sit on a Monday evening, and I'm the only guy in a room of about 40 or 50 women. So it occurs to, and I go for 1 hour a week. 1 hour a week. And I'm sitting there either being totally ignored or humiliated. Now, but the stuff that ladies talk about isn't always what men talk about. Especially when it comes to why you haven't lost weight. I know everything that there is to know, that I need to know. But the point then is, it's to do with culture. So if you go to an industrial complex, and you are now a woman on a shift, it's not about whether the job's dirty or not. But if you are sitting with 20 guys who work on shifts and you come to your break and they're all talking about football or whatever men talk about, you're not alone, but you're quite lonely. So I've heard it said that our jobs are good. The jobs are fine. A technician job, a panel job, an operator job is a demanding job. It's instrument jobs are good jobs. They're intellectually stimulating jobs. And I think it's more to do, not so much in the professional levels, although it's still there a little bit, but the perception is that's not for me because it's a man's world. And back in the day, John will remember, when we recruited, and ICI did recruit female apprentices, we really did. So what did we do? Put one on nylon, we put one on polyester, because we thought that's what we did. It was a bad idea. What we should have done was gone to my critical mass theory and put them all in the same place, because then you start to change the culture. So it's a very complicated issue, but it's not all, again, so that's about, the argument you'll then get is, if we put all of our raw recruits in the same place, that's a problem from an operations point of view. We have to manage it. So it's about managing that diversity and having the systems and the processes and the support mechanisms in place that will start to make a difference, and even more difficult in SMEs. So again, I don't look to government. I look to industry to understand, what actually, and it's not the jobs. I honestly don't think it's the jobs. It's a lot to do with culture. So anyway, so that's my Weight Watchers view on life. Let me turn that round. If you're a scientist, why aren't you standing to be an MP? We can all complain about, you're either inside the tent or you're outside the tent, basically. So I think if you want to change something, you have to hold your hand up and go do something about it. So I think if we, and I think I agree, collectively, we'd all say, although there are lots of engineers who I don't think are particularly good managers, so you've got to be careful, what you wish for here. I use engineers there rather than scientists, because I was just conscious of the company I'm in. So yeah. Well, okay. But the point is, collectively, I think we'd agree. So as bodies, as an organization, are we encouraging, the right people to stand, on a platform that we'd all want them to actually help Parliament generally to understand better what manufacturing can give. So I think it's as simple as maybe we have to work harder to encourage some of our brethren to stand at the next election. That would be interesting. A house full of scientists and engineers all elected. Wow. That would be interesting. That would be a collaboration that would be interesting to watch. I go back to, first of all, from a gas point of view, I think most people agree, far smarter than me, that we have more than enough gas to last as far as we can see. And the point I would, so that from that sense, I'm not saying that's sustainable because it isn't, but you know, from an energy point of view, I think that will certainly last us until we find something else which is far, far better. I do believe that we have to find solutions to the problems we create, and I think that's the challenge. But interestingly, on water, did I talk last year about nanotechnologies? I think I did, didn't I? About membrane technologies. But so the fact is, you know, I listened to some very smart ladies in UNESCO talking about inventing molecules that were basically selecting viruses. So we got water purification at very low energy. So, and that they're already out there. So imagine where that will be in 20 years' time. So no more desalination, no more, you just got a series of membranes that will selectively take out virus. It might not be nice to drink, but it won't kill you. So that would be, you know, in terms of Africa and some of the countries that would need that kind of technology, that's going to be there. So I think from a water perspective, I could see longer term solutions. I do believe that there are solutions to gas which are not within grasp. But I think that to make it truly sustainable, we've got to get there inside 15 to 20 years. Otherwise, I think public opinion will maybe tolerate what engineers and scientists, government are trying to do. But if global warming continued, I could see just a moratorium on gas, full stop. The issue that I see also is, and I'm not picking on the US or Asia at all, European legislation is quite onerous in terms of the environmental constraints. The US, from a ground and soil and air pollution, is quite tight, but from a carbon perspective, isn't anywhere close. And the risk is that we make it more difficult in Europe to emit CO2, which is a good thing. But you make it so difficult, then all you actually succeed in doing is moving it everywhere else. So you didn't actually solve anything other than you move manufacturing and value, GVA, into Asia or emerge. Brazil, watch Brazil, in terms of, if you look on a map at where their natural reserves, that's going to be a huge economy. We talk about the BRIC economies. Brazil is going to be huge in the next 20, 30 years. Now, are they going to care about, so I'd like to think they would be, but I wouldn't bet on it. So I think we have to, from a sustainability point of view in Europe, if we can find the solutions that we can give, humbly, to the rest of the world in search of energy, and who are we to say that somebody in Brazil shouldn't put a light on in his hut? We should agree that that's the right thing to do. Then I think we have the wherewithal to make that happen. Not today, but certainly in the longer term. Okay. Well, I assume. So it sounds very arrogant. I assume. I think I can assume there's no growth in Europe at all. None. Okay. So that doesn't mean you don't make any money. Europe has got 400 million consumers in it, and all buy mobile phones and TVs and whatever. So let's assume that the market doesn't grow. It's to do with how you serve the market. So you remember, I haven't got the slide because it was in the previous pack. But if you start on a base where your energy and feedstocks are structurally, let's say, twice as cheap as they are today, then what you've done is put all that value into the supply chain. So what you are doing is serving the same market. It doesn't even need to grow. But in the case of, let me give you an example. If you remember, I talked about depolymerization last year. So if you collected all of the polycarbonate, polystyrene, polyurethane in the UK, it's about 5 million tonnes. So if you depolymerize that, then ignoring the cost of capital, these plants exist. There's one in India, which is running about 25 kilotons. The energy step to do that gives you benzene at 0.5 benzene. So you've just suddenly, in that business, you've doubled your gross margin. And you're a hero because you've avoided burning that in incinerators. So the market didn't change, but you're suddenly in a sustainable industry because you are rewarding your shareholders because you are generating far more value from being smarter and operating with lower feedstock costs or energy costs or both. So you don't need to assume growth to make money or to have a sustainable business. And if you are that competitive, then that means that the US and Asia, with their logistics of coming here, have an additional burden to overcome. So again, that just helps the sustainability argument in Europe. So I don't have to assume growth to assume sustainability, if that answers your question. I think the one that's furthest along at the moment, because enclosed photo bioreactors, you're into tens of tons. You've seen the pictures, I guess. So you've seen the big arrays. They're in Portugal and Spain and other places. The enclosed photo bioreactors offer an acceleration, but probably today you can't see. Teesside, you know, where I live, if you look at the conurbation, to give you an example of the size of the problem, or the opportunity rather, emits about 10 million tons of carbon. So Runcorn would be the same, Grangemouth would be the same, Humberside. You know, so those conurbations, you're talking millions of tons of carbon. So anaerobic digestion is probably in the area of hundreds of thousands of tons a year. So can I imagine, so probably that one's closer to, let's assume that we got from hundreds of thousands to 1 million, and you built 10 plants. Then I've got 10 million. Can I imagine that in 10 years? Yes, I can. So I honestly don't know, but I think it's about getting smart people together and thinking through which ones are the winners, which we're not going to back one, which 2 or 3 shall we back? How do we work together to get from where we are? So I would say today, knowing what I know, although I do like enclosed photo bioreactors, I have a cunning plan which I'll tell you about later on, but I'm going to patent it first. You know, you have these moments where you think, oh, no. Anyway. So I think anaerobic digestion is probably the furthest on. And we're into hundreds of thousands, not millions, but then it's not on a lab. It's not in a lab either. So it's big. So that's probably the furthest. Thank you.